Hello and welcome to my season review part 2, difficult second chapter. And in this episode I go from 0 to hero, back squarely to 0, and pretty much stay there, encounter some near misses, and continue to share the journey and rollercoaster of being a racing driver. Thanks for tuning in to part 2 of my season review. You can watch part 1 here, but for now we'll kick off where we left off, starting my second ever race at the Brands Hatch circuit. So for race 2 I was starting P26, so 26th on the grid, which is a long way back from where I'd started in 8th for the first race. And in the end, I think I finished in P18. Looking at my notes here, yeah, I finished 18th, so I made up eight places. And I was just really happy to finish the race. You know, that was a milestone. I'd finished my first ever car race, and regardless, of what position I'd finished, it was great for me. Once again, I felt a little bit emotional because I'd done it. I was officially a racing driver in my eyes. So that was great. Overall, it was a great weekend, a massive milestone in my life, and something that I'll remember and cherish forever. And then we moved on to Snetterton for round 2 about a month later. So Snetterton, what can I say about Snetterton? I would call Snetterton the difficult second chapter where it got real, basically. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. So in the 4 weeks leading up to Snetterton, I did some work on preparing for the race weekend. I did quite a lot of work in terms of looking over my track notes from when I tested their pre-season. But one thing I would say when it comes to racing is that track time is absolutely key. The key to being as proficient as you can on track is by doing as much track time as you can, if possible, on track. And whilst it's not always practical to be on track between races due to time, due to resources, it's imperative to do as much practice as you can, whether it's on track or in a sim. And to be honest with you, I'm not too confident that I got enough track time between Brands Hatch and Snetterton, if I'm honest with you. So on the Thursday and Friday before the race weekend, you have testing that's available. So for Snetterton, I was initially due to test on the Thursday, but due to other commitments away from racing, I wasn't able to do that. So I swapped my test day for Friday instead of Thursday. Now, the forecast for the weather at Snetterton was due to be dry and sunny, whilst on Friday when I got to the track, it was just a washout basically. No dry running whatsoever, which meant that number one, I wasn't really keen to take the car out on track and risk it. There's no point in taking the car out in the rain when it's going to be dry for the rest of the weekend to risk coming off and getting yourself a damage bill. And it also meant I had no representative running for the race weekend whatsoever, which was annoying because had I been able to keep my initial test session for the Thursday when it was dry, I would have had some more representative running, and that was quite annoying, to be honest with you, but that was the situation I found myself in, and it was what it was. I just decided to put that aside and do what I could for the race for the rest of the weekend based on the knowledge that I'd had. And another difficult thing I found that weekend was that so when you have the testing on Thursday or Friday, you're put into a group. You're grouped. You could either be group 1, 2, 3 to 4, or you're grouped in terms of you're given your wristband colour. But I believe I was in group 2, so I was in, and then in your group you're given a series of I think 20-minute or 30-minute sessions throughout the day. You get 4 or 5 of those. I was in Group 2, so my first test session of the day was the second one. And towards the end of the first session, which preceded my session, news came about of a massive accident involving 2 or 3 cars. So yeah, that was my first kind of impression of how dangerous this sport could be. And the track was, or the testing for the day was delayed whilst these drivers were taken to hospital, because in order for testing or racing to go ahead, there needs to be at least one ambulance at the track, and the ambulance or ambulances that were at the track had to go to hospital to take these drivers to hospital. But yeah, I'd say maybe I wouldn't say that situation kind of put my mind set off for the rest of the weekend, but I would say maybe it was at the back of my mind. It just wrote it home how dangerous the sport can be. So that, coupled with the rain, meant that Friday wasn't the best day, but nevertheless Saturday was a new day. I decided to do the best I could for qualifying. And when it came to qualifying, I'd say I did the best I could, but my driving wasn't the best, you know. In fact, I think the fundamentals of my driving were quite shocking, especially when it came to gear changing. I don't know why at Brands Hatch it felt really good, but for some reason at Snetterton, I just had a lot of trouble with moving from second to third. And yeah, that really compromised my qualifying. So qualifying was terrible. I qualified 20th at Snetterton, and that was all just down to my poor driving, essentially. I hold my hands up, that was it. And then moving into, but I accepted that. So, you know, for me, when I have a bad result or anything, once I've got the bad result, I can't do anything about it apart from just look forward to what I can do for the next event or the next session. That's it. Just try to learn what I can from that, and then take those lessons forward. And then we get to the race. I remember race 1 very well because it was another defining moment of my season. I get to the grid slot. I set the revs. You know, think I've had the car in gear. Set the revs, and then drop the clutch, and the car goes nowhere. I realised what I'd done immediately. The car wasn't in gear. I knew that because the car wasn't going. So within a split second, I put it in first gear and get going. But yeah, that could have been a very bad accident. So looking back at my footage, basically what I'd done is I did have the car in first gear on the grid before the lights went out. But it looked like I had an itch in my nose. So what I did was just instinctively took the car out of gear, rubbed my nose under my helmet. But then once I'd done that, I neglected to put the car back into gear. So that was why the car wasn't in gear.
And then you suddenly realise what a 100% 24 carat plonker he really is.
I was absolutely mortified at that. It dropped me to the back of the field. So I just spent the rest of the race, you know, going through, trying to do the best I could. So I started 20th. By the end of the first lap, I think I was 29th. And managed to race through to 23rd. And whilst I enjoyed myself, I just wasn't really happy with that result at all. And really decided that I needed to fix up, really, because to me, you know, even though I appreciated racing and that I got the signature, you know, I don't go racing to come near the back. You know, I want to do the best I can. I've got, you know, high standards for myself, and I want to do as well as I can. And, you know, coming 23rd just wasn't really acceptable to me whatsoever. And another thing that bothered me that weekend as well was, whilst, you know, the car felt really good at Brands Hatch, you know, I felt one with the car, it felt great. At Snetterton, you know, the handling just wasn't that great, and I just couldn't really understand it. Now, in hindsight, I know it's because I didn't really have the optimal rear anti-roll bar setting on the car. I used the wrong one, which I now realise was the issue I had, but I didn't realise that till later in the season. And it just goes to show the benefit of, you know, having people in your inner circle that know what they're doing. So in hindsight, yeah, I was a bit disappointed that, I didn't have that basic knowledge myself. And then in race 2 the next day, it was okay. I pulled off what I'd call the overtaking manoeuvre of my life later in the race. But due to my handling woes, I came off track and gave that position back on late in the race. I think I came 22nd in the second race. So yeah, a weekend to forget really. After the highs of Brands Hatch, due to the results I had at Snetterton and what happened at the weekend, it was just a bit of a low for me, and made me realise what I let myself in for. I decided that I needed to step up my game if I wanted to get to the level that I wanted to. I knew it was going to be hard to win because of the strength of the drivers that were in the championship. You've got a few very talented drivers there, and the fact that most of them had had experience of racing in the championship or the championship below the year before me. But I wanted to do the best I could, and coming 20th and below just wasn't going to cut it for me. So I decided that I was going to give it my all for Silverstone for the next race weekend, the month after Snetterton.
In part 3, I continue my season review by talking about balancing racing with a full-time job and go that little bit deeper than the track action, including everything that I do to try and get myself to the place on the grid that I want to be, with lots of action along the way. Please give us a thumbs up if you liked what you saw, kindly leave your feedback in the comments below, and subscribe to see more. Thank you for watching, and see you soon.